The house on Maple Drive was far more than just a structure of wood and plaster for Miguel and Elena Martinez and their daughter Sofia. It represented the physical embodiment of a cherished dream, one pursued tenaciously across borders, through countless hardships, and over years of unwavering, relentless effort. It stood on its quiet suburban lot as solid, tangible proof that their myriad sacrifices had not been in vain, that their leap of faith was justified. Miguel, a man whose innate skill with complex engines was matched only by his quiet, steadfast determination, worked tirelessly, often long hours, as a valued mechanic at a reputable local garage. Elena, equally dedicated and industrious, managed demanding housekeeping duties at a nearby upscale hotel, her days invariably long and physically taxing, but always fueled by the sustaining vision of achieving lasting stability and opportunity for her precious family. Their teenage daughter, Sofia, was the bright, shining star reflecting their collective hope for a better future. She excelled in her studies at the local high school, her intelligent, expressive eyes mirroring the potent promise they all desperately sought within the seemingly peaceful, tree-lined enclave of Oak Ridge Meadows. They poured their hearts, their savings, and their limited free time into making their new house a home. The modest lawn was kept impeccably neat, a vibrant green carpet mirroring the meticulous efforts of their more established, long-term neighbors. Cheerful, overflowing flower boxes, bursting with the vibrant, life-affirming colors Elena loved, bright reds, sunny yellows, deep purples that spoke of her heritage, soon adorned the windowsills, adding a personal touch of warmth and welcome. They offered genuine, friendly waves and warm greetings to everyone they encountered during evening walks or weekend yard work. They were trying, with profound sincerity and earnestness, to carefully, respectfully weave themselves into the existing social fabric of this new community, to find acceptance, to truly belong. But from the very moment their dusty moving truck had finally pulled away from the curb, leaving them standing proudly, hopefully, on their new porch, they felt the unwelcome, persistent weight of a cold, intensely scrutinizing, judgmental gaze emanating from the house directly across the street. It radiated from the perfectly maintained, architecturally conforming home of Beverly McLaughlin. Beverly, a prominent, influential, and highly vocal member of the Oak Ridge Meadows Residents Council, viewed the arrival of the Martinez family not as the potential enrichment of her neighborhood through diversity, but as an offensive, unwelcome, almost alien intrusion into her carefully curated, rigidly controlled world. Their very presence, their otherness, seemed to fundamentally disrupt her deeply ingrained sense of order and propriety. The lyrical sound of Spanish occasionally overheard floating from their own backyard during quiet family gatherings grated harshly on her ears, feeling like an affront. The vibrant, joyful hues of the flowers Elena meticulously planted, those bold reds, sunny yellows, deep purples, deviated jarringly, offensively, from the neighborhood's unspoken, yet strictly preferred, palette of muted pastels, subdued earth tones, and restrained greens. It looked, to Beverly, unprofessional, unrefined. It all offended Beverly's rigid sense of aesthetic conformity and, far more deeply, prodded relentlessly at her ingrained, unacknowledged, yet powerful racial prejudice. She couldn't, or perhaps simply wouldn't, articulate her profound, visceral discomfort as raw racism, not even within the privacy of her own thoughts. It was easier, safer, more socially acceptable, to deny its existence. Instead, she skillfully, perhaps even subconsciously, cloaked her potent animosity in the sterile, impersonal, seemingly objective language of community association regulations and intricate bylaw enforcement. A garbage bin retrieved from the curb by Miguel perhaps an hour later than Beverly personally deemed appropriate resulted in a sharply worded, formal email complaint to the council board, citing neglect of community standards. Sofia's well-used, slightly scratched bicycle, left leaning for a short time against the family's own garage door instead of being immediately stored inside, triggered a formal written warning, printed out and slipped pointedly, anonymously, under their front door during the night. Soft, traditional mariachi music played at a perfectly respectable, barely audible volume during a small family barbecue celebrating Sofia's academic success one Saturday afternoon, was immediately reported by Beverly via the official online portal as disruptive noise pollution, infringing upon her right to quiet enjoyment of her property. Each carefully documented complaint, sometimes delivered with a painfully tight-lipped, utterly insincere smile during a chance encounter at the mailbox, more often filed formally, electronically, with the governing board, was a deliberately aimed, carefully calibrated microaggression. It constituted a steady, relentless, soul-crushing drip of targeted hostility, meticulously designed not just to correct perceived minor infractions, but to make the Martinez family feel perpetually uncomfortable, constantly watched, judged, criticized, and ultimately, undeniably unwelcome in their own hard-earned home. When the other members of the Residence Council Board, reviewing Beverly's increasingly petty, frequent, and often demonstrably baseless complaints against the newcomers, found little actual merit in them and consequently began to largely ignore her persistent, accusatory emails and follow-up phone calls, Beverly's simmering resentment festered rapidly, darkening into something far uglier, more dangerous. Feeling unheard, dismissed, personally slighted by the very organization she so fervently championed and sought to control, she retreated further, deeper, into the angry, validating, self-reinforcing echo chambers of the internet. She found solace, community, and disturbing ideological reinforcement in obscure online forums, dark, unmoderated corners of the web dedicated to fringe white nationalist ideologies, virulent anti-immigrant conspiracy theories, and hateful rhetoric targeting minorities. There, shielded effectively by anonymous usernames and fueled by the shared paranoia and grievances of unseen, like-minded strangers across the country, her previously veiled suburban prejudice blossomed rapidly, unstoppably, into outright, venomous, unvarnished hatred. She typed furious, lengthy screeds online, lamenting the perceived erosion of traditional values and the changing character of her beloved Oak Ridge meadows due to unwanted elements. She railed vitriolically against illegals and foreigners who were supposedly invading and destroying established American communities like hers. She indulged in increasingly detailed, violent online fantasies about ways to reclaim her neighborhood, to forcibly restore its former, entirely imagined, state of demographic purity and cultural homogeneity. She began speaking more openly, more urgently, more specifically, within these closed, radicalized online groups about the pressing need to send a strong message, to take decisive, direct action, to make the Martinez family understand, unequivocally, that they needed to leave Oak Ridge Meadows. For their own good. These were no longer just idle, angry, keyboard ramblings. Her online postings grew demonstrably more specific, more targeted, more threatening, more venomous. This significant, documented escalation in her online rhetoric and activities attracted the quiet, professional attention of unseen, highly trained watchers. Her increasingly volatile online footprint, cross-referenced with other intelligence streams, triggered alarms within a specialized federal task force dedicated to monitoring domestic extremism and identifying potential hate crime perpetrators. Special Agent Thompson, a seasoned investigator within that task force, personally flagged Beverly McLaughlin's profile for closer scrutiny. Her escalating rhetoric, coupled with concerning online search queries for certain restricted materials and her participation in encrypted discussions advocating direct action against perceived immigrant threats, put her firmly, squarely onto their active monitoring radar. They initiated legally authorized passive surveillance protocols, meticulously gathering data available from her public online activities, carefully cross-referencing information with known extremist networks and individuals, patiently, professionally building a detailed intelligence profile. They watched. They documented. They waited, needing to ascertain if her hateful words and veiled threats would eventually cross the critical, undeniable line into overt, prosecutable criminal action. Frustrated by the neighborhood council's perceived inaction and dismissal of her valid concerns, feeling increasingly ignored and impotent through official community channels, and dangerously emboldened by the toxic, constant affirmation swirling like poison within her online echo chamber community, Beverly made a fateful, irreversible decision. She would take matters entirely into her own hands. Direct, decisive action was clearly the only remaining option. If a relentless barrage of fabricated code violations and petty complaints wouldn't succeed in driving the Martinez family out of her neighborhood, perhaps a serious, life-altering criminal accusation would definitively destroy their carefully built lives, shatter their dreams, and finally force them to flee in disgrace and fear. A desperate, deeply dangerous, and profoundly malicious plan began to fully form, crystallizing in the dark recesses of her resentful mind. She would frame them. She would plant irrefutable evidence. She would use the system against them, leveraging shadowy contacts cultivated within the dark, anonymous depths of the extremist internet forums. Shadowy individuals who boasted crudely online about their supposed expertise and methods for disrupting the system, harassing designated targets, and avoiding detection. Beverly managed, with disturbing, surprising ease, to acquire a small but potent quantity of high-purity cocaine. The transaction itself was conducted entirely through anonymous, encrypted digital channels, meticulously designed by her contact to leave few, if any, easily traceable electronic footprints leading back to her. But the physical product, the small, nondescript plastic baggie containing the illicit, dangerous white powder, was now secretly in her possession, feeling strangely heavy, alien, and dangerously illicit within the pristine, obsessively organized, seemingly benign confines of her perfect suburban home. She felt a perverse, intoxicating surge of power, a sickeningly twisted sense of righteous justification flooding her senses, overriding any nascent guilt or fear. She wasn't committing a serious felony, she rationalized fiercely. She was protecting her neighborhood. She was safeguarding her cherished way of life, her community's integrity, from foreign contamination and undesirable elements. She was being a vigilant citizen, a true patriot. Agent Thompson's specialized surveillance team duly noted Beverly's recent, confirmed use of specific encrypted communication platforms known to be favored by extremist groups, followed almost immediately by a brief, documented offline meeting at a neutral public location with an unknown individual previously flagged by local law enforcement databases for various past low-level drug possession and minor property crime offenses. While the specific nature of their quick, furtive exchange wasn't definitively captured by the surveillance methods employed at that stage, the timing, the context, and the known profile of the individual involved significantly elevated the investigating agency's level of concern regarding Beverly's intentions. Coupled with her recent, highly specific online posts fantasizing about the Martinez family finally needing to face serious legal consequences and at last learn their lesson the hard way, the federal investigators collectively felt there was now more than sufficient probable cause to justify escalating their surveillance measures significantly. A federal judge reviewed the accumulated evidence and swiftly granted a sealed warrant authorizing more targeted, intensive monitoring of Beverly McLaughlin. This included specific judicial authorization for pole-mounted camera surveillance covering the public-facing areas around both Beverly's property and the Martinez family's home directly across the street. They needed concrete, visual evidence. They needed to see, irrefutably, if she would actually act decisively on her increasingly specific, alarming, veiled threats against her neighbors. In the deep, silent, pre-dawn hours of a quiet Tuesday morning, while the rest of Oak Ridge Meadows slept soundly, blissfully unaware, under a comforting blanket of artificial suburban tranquility punctuated only by the gentle hum of streetlights, Beverly McLaughlin slipped silently, stealthily, out of her own locked back door. She was dressed entirely in dark, nondescript clothing, her face partially obscured by a dark baseball cap pulled low over her eyes, designed to blend into the shadows. Her heart pounded violently in her chest with a discordant, almost painful mixture of paralyzing, adrenaline-fueled fear and an exhilarating, overriding sense of malicious excitement and righteous purpose. She clutched the small, tightly sealed plastic baggie containing the potent white powder tightly in her gloved hand, the illicit substance feeling alien and powerful against her skin. She moved quickly, keeping low, staying close to the concealing shadows cast by hedges and bushes, darting across her own dew-dampened front lawn, and then scurrying rapidly across the empty, silent street. She kept religiously to the deep shadows cast by the large, mature oak trees that lined the peaceful residential sidewalk, their leaves rustling faintly, conspiratorially, above her head in the slight pre-dawn breeze. She reached the Martinez family's mailbox, standing innocently, vulnerably, sentinel-like at the end of their short concrete driveway. Its cheerful, hand-painted decorative flowers seemed to mock her dark mission in the dim, uncertain, pre-dawn light. Her hands trembled uncontrollably now, despite her resolve, as she fumbled clumsily with the cold metal lid, her thin gloves making the simple task surprisingly awkward. She finally managed to pry it open, the metal hinges emitting a faint, betraying squeak in the profound stillness of the morning. She quickly shoved the incriminating baggie deep inside the dark cavity of the mailbox, pushing it far back, concealing it carefully behind where the day's expected legitimate mail would eventually be placed by the oblivious postal carrier hours later. She glanced around furtively one last time, her eyes darting nervously left and right down the deserted, sleeping street. No lights flickered on in any of the surrounding houses. No early morning delivery trucks or newspaper carriers passed. The world seemed utterly asleep, completely oblivious to her clandestine, criminal act. Feeling a final, powerful surge of illicit triumph and perverse accomplishment, she scurried rapidly back across the empty street, retracing her path carefully through the concealing shadows, and slipped silently back into the perceived security of her own locked home, locking the door securely behind her. It was done. The trap was meticulously, perfectly set. Her perceived enemies would soon be dealt with. Unbeknownst to Beverly, basking in the glow of her perceived cleverness, her entire furtive, criminal journey, exiting her house under cover of darkness, crossing the street with attempted stealth, manipulating the mailbox, stuffing the illegal package inside, and hastily returning to the apparent safety of her own property, was captured in startlingly high resolution, undeniable infrared detail by a discreetly placed, state-of-the-art federal surveillance camera, positioned perfectly by Agent Thompson's forward-thinking team days earlier, anticipating just such an escalation. Simultaneously, her shadowy movements near the curb directly triggered the sensitive motion-activated recording function on the Martinez family's own recently installed, inexpensive consumer-grade doorbell camera, providing a second, crucial, corroborating visual angle of her illegal actions from a different perspective. She was caught, definitively, from two angles. Later that same morning, after waiting a carefully calculated, strategic interval of several hours to further distance herself temporarily from the pre-dawn planting act, Beverly retrieved the cheap, untraceable burner phone, another tactic gleaned carefully from her online extremist associates, which she had kept hidden away deep within her bedroom closet. She used it to make a brief, deliberately anonymous call to the main non-emergency public line of the Oak Ridge Meadows Police Department headquarters. "Yes, hello? I need to report some drug activity," she said, making a conscious effort to alter her natural voice slightly, pitching it lower than usual, adding a slight tremor of feigned nervousness and civic concern. "It's occurring at the house located at 128 Maple Drive. That's the Martinez residence." She paused, carefully adding fabricated but plausible-sounding details to lend credibility to her false report. "I've seen some really suspicious people. Strange cars coming and going there very late at night, you know? I've witnessed quick package exchanges happening out near the curb. I really think they might be dealing illegal drugs from that house." She delivered the crucial hook, the specific piece of information designed to trigger immediate police action. "You should probably check their mailbox right away if you can. I definitely saw someone. Looked really suspicious, stashed something small, a package, inside their mailbox very early this morning, just before dawn broke. It looked really shady." She provided just enough seemingly specific, concerning detail to sound like a genuinely concerned, observant, responsible neighbor fulfilling their civic duty, then disconnected the call abruptly, severing the connection before the potentially inquisitive dispatcher could ask any further probing questions or attempt to trace the call, which would have been futile anyway, given the burner phone. Two uniformed local police officers, dutifully responding as required to the anonymous citizen tip, which had been flagged by dispatch as potential narcotics-related activity, arrived at the Martinez family home around mid-morning, their cruiser pulling conspicuously into the quiet driveway. Miguel and Elena were just finishing a quick, shared cup of coffee together in their bright, tidy kitchen before Miguel had to leave for his demanding afternoon shift at the garage. Sophia was upstairs in her bedroom, gathering her textbooks for school, humming along softly to music playing through her earbuds. The sharp, sudden, authoritative knock on their front door startled them all, shattering the peaceful morning routine. Seeing the two marked police cruisers parked directly outside their house through the small peephole lens, their initial momentary confusion turned instantly, sickeningly, into a familiar, chilling, visceral fear. For many immigrant families, even those like the Martinezes with perfect legal standing and no history of wrongdoing, an unexpected, official encounter with law enforcement figures carries a heavy, latent background anxiety, a deep-seated fear born of vulnerability, language barriers, and painful stories shared within their communities about misunderstandings, profiling, and disproportionate consequences. Dios mío, protect us now. What have we done? Why are the police here? Elena thought, her hand flying instinctively, protectively, to her chest, her heart beginning to pound erratically against her ribs. Mr. and Mrs. Martinez? The lead officer asked politely enough, but his tone was unmistakably formal, official, brooking no argument. Yes? Officers? Is everything all right here? Miguel asked, opening the front door cautiously, only partway at first, his spoken English careful, precise, deliberately neutral, trying desperately to mask the sudden tremor of deep anxiety that tightened his voice. Sir, ma'am, the officer began, his eyes scanning professionally past Miguel into the neat, welcoming hallway behind him, taking in the family photos on the wall. We received an anonymous citizen tip earlier this morning regarding potential narcotics activity possibly originating from this specific residence. He paused, letting the heavy implication of the words sink in fully. Specifically, the caller mentioned observing suspicious items potentially being placed inside your curbside mailbox earlier today. Elena gasped audibly then, a small, wounded sound, stepping back involuntarily as if physically struck by the accusation. Sophia appeared silently in the hallway doorway behind her parents, drawn by the serious tone of the voices, her intelligent eyes wide now with confusion, disbelief, and rapidly dawning fear. Drugs? Here? In our house? They think we deal drugs? No, that's impossible. It's insane, Sophia thought, feeling a wave of dizzying disbelief and rising nausea wash over her. This is what she wanted. That woman. Drugs, Miguel echoed, his voice rising sharply now in bewildered, indignant protest. Here? At our home? Officers, I assure you, that is absolutely impossible. We would never. We are good people. There must be some terrible, terrible mistake. We understand your position, sir, the lead officer replied, his professional tone becoming slightly, almost imperceptibly, more guarded, more suspicious, in the face of Miguel's vehement, emotional denial. This was a common reaction, guilty or innocent. Would you mind if we just take a quick look inside your mailbox now? Just to verify the specific information we received in the tip. It was phrased as a request, but carried the undeniable weight of official authority. Refusal was not a realistic option. Hesitantly, feeling trapped, cornered, voiceless, and deeply, profoundly humiliated by the mere suggestion, Miguel nodded numbly, miserably. What other choice did they possibly have? To refuse would only instantly make them look guilty, confirm the officer's suspicions. He walked stiffly, shoulders slumped, flanked closely by the two uniformed officers, down his short, neat concrete driveway towards the cheerful, brightly painted mailbox standing innocently by the curb. The colorful flowers Elena had so lovingly painted on it just last month suddenly seemed like a cruel, mocking irony in the harsh morning light. One of the officers, carefully pulling on a pair of standard-issue disposable latex gloves, opened the metal mailbox lid with a deliberate click. He reached his gloved hand deep inside, felt around for a moment, and then slowly pulled out the small, innocuous-looking, yet incredibly damning transparent plastic baggie containing the fine, incriminating white powder. Cocaine. Miguel's heart plummeted sickeningly into the pit of his stomach. His breath caught sharply, painfully. I swear to you, officers, upon my life, upon my family. I do not know how that possibly got there. It is absolutely not ours. I have never seen it before in my life. Someone must have put it there. Please, you must believe me, he stammered, panic finally overwhelming his composure entirely, his voice rising, cracking with desperation, pleading in his eyes. Behind him, near the front door, Elena began to cry softly, uncontrollably, burying her face in her trembling hands, overwhelmed by fear and shame. Sophia rushed forward instinctively, grabbing her mother's arm tightly, her own face pale and terrified, tears welling in her wide eyes as she stared at the scene unfolding, feeling utterly helpless. The situation was rapidly, horrifyingly, unstoppably spiraling into an inescapable waking nightmare. The two local police officers exchanged a brief, significant, knowing look. The anonymous tip had been specific about the method and location, something stashed in the mailbox. And here, precisely as described, was the physical evidence. Drugs found on the premises. Standard operating procedure in such a clear-cut discovery situation would likely involve, at the very minimum, immediately detaining the adult residents for further, intensive questioning down at the station. It would almost certainly involve securing the house as a potential crime scene and immediately seeking a search warrant from a judge based on the narcotics discovery, allowing them to conduct a full, intrusive search of the family's home and vehicle. Things looked exceptionally grim, legally perilous, for the innocent Martinez family. The air grew thick, heavy, almost suffocating, with unspoken accusation, with the weight of suspicion. The initial professional politeness of the officers evaporated, replaced by a guarded, procedural distance. Miguel could feel their skepticism hardening into certainty. He felt trapped, utterly powerless, watching his carefully built life, his family's future, crumbling around him because of a small plastic bag of white powder he had never seen before, planted by an enemy he couldn't fight. He opened his mouth again, wanting to plead, to explain, to make them understand their goodness, their innocence, but no words came out. Only a choked, despairing sound. The silence stretched, heavy and terrifying, punctuated only by Elena's muffled sobs. But before the local officers could proceed further down that standard, potentially devastating, life-altering path of detention and investigation based on the planted evidence, two dark, unmarked sedans pulled up quietly, almost silently, seeming to appear out of nowhere, parking directly behind the marked police cruisers already on scene. Agent Thompson and two other plainclothes FBI agents emerged swiftly, purposefully, from the vehicles. Their badges were displayed prominently, clipped to their belts or held up briefly, their demeanor calm, but radiating an unmistakable aura of quiet federal authority that immediately commanded attention. Officers, Agent Thompson addressed the local police directly, his voice even, professional, but carrying undeniable weight and authority. FBI, we might be able to shed some considerable light and provide crucial context regarding this particular situation you're handling. The local cops were visibly taken aback, clearly surprised by the sudden, unannounced appearance of federal agents at what had seemed, until moments ago, like a fairly routine, albeit potentially significant, local narcotics tip response. They exchanged puzzled glances. Thompson quickly, quietly, conferred with the senior local officer, pulling him aside slightly for privacy, explaining concisely, professionally, the resident residing directly across the street, Beverly McLaughlin, is the primary subject of an ongoing, active federal investigation into domestic extremism, credible online threats, and potential federal hate crimes. He gestured subtly towards the mailbox, where the other local officer still held the bagged, planted evidence. We possess compelling reason, and now definitive visual evidence, to believe she may be attempting to maliciously frame Mr. Martinez and his family. His voice was firm, certain. We believe, in fact we know, she planted that narcotics evidence herself earlier this morning, under cover of darkness. To underscore his point dramatically, eliminating any doubt, Thompson nodded to one of his accompanying agents, who promptly produced a standard issue, encrypted tablet computer from a briefcase. On the bright, high-resolution screen, crystal clear, time-stamped infrared surveillance footage played silently, but damningly. Beverly McLaughlin, her identity absolutely unmistakable despite the dim pre-dawn light and her attempts at disguise. Furtively stuffing the small baggie into the Martinez family's mailbox just hours earlier. The footage was irrefutable. Thompson also gestured subtly towards the small, consumer-grade camera mounted unobtrusively above the Martinez's front door. "And I strongly suspect," he added, "that their own inexpensive consumer doorbell camera likely captured her actions as well, providing clear, corroborating visual evidence from a different angle." He paused. "Furthermore, Agent Riley here has already confirmed that we have traced the anonymous 911 tip call you received back to a specific burner phone we have previously linked directly to Mrs. McLaughlin through prior electronic surveillance and investigative means." The two local officers stared intently, first at the damning surveillance footage playing on the tablet, then back at the terrified, tearful, clearly victimized Martinez family huddled together near their front door, then across the street towards Beverly McLaughlin's pristine, silent house, where she was almost certainly watching eagerly from behind her perfect curtains, likely anticipating the satisfyingly dramatic arrest of her innocent neighbors. Their professional expressions shifted rapidly, from initial procedural suspicion towards the Martinez family, to dawning realization of the setup, then quickly hardened into visible, palpable professional anger at having been blatantly manipulated, their valuable time wasted, and, most alarmingly, nearly drawn into unknowingly facilitating a malicious, potentially devastating, hate-motivated frame-up. "All right, Agent Thompson," the senior local officer said finally, nodding grimly, his tone shifting immediately to one of full interagency cooperation. "Understood completely. Thank you for the intervention. What do you need from us right now?" "We'll take custody of the subject, Ms. McLaughlin, and handle the subsequent federal charges from this point forward," Thompson replied smoothly, efficiently. "If your team could secure the planted package as evidence according to your departmental protocols, logging the chain of custody carefully, we'd appreciate the assistance. We have a federal warrant already prepared and signed for Mrs. McLaughlin's immediate arrest based on our prior investigation and this morning's overt act." While two of the FBI agents remained behind on the Martinez property, speaking reassuringly, gently, to the stunned, bewildered, and now immensely, tearfully relieved Martinez family, explaining briefly and compassionately that they had indeed been deliberately targeted by their neighbor and were entirely innocent victims of a vicious, planned setup. Agent Thompson, accompanied now by the two local police officers providing necessary backup and local jurisdiction presence, walked purposefully, resolutely, across the quiet street towards Beverly McLaughlin's immaculate, silent front door. Beverly answered the door after the first sharp, official-sounding knock, her face arranged carefully into a mask of feigned surprise and solicitous neighborly concern. She was clearly ready, perhaps even eager, to offer her well-rehearsed, false, concerned citizen testimony against the Martinez family to the local officers she had expected to see. The carefully practiced look of surprise morphed instantly, however, into genuine, slack-jawed shock, which then rapidly dissolved into raw, unadulterated terror as she saw not just the local police officer she had anticipated, but the stern-faced, unsmiling, businesslike federal agents standing beside them on her pristine porch. "Beverly McLaughlin," Agent Thompson stated formally, his voice steady, leaving absolutely no room for argument or evasion. "You are under arrest for multiple violations of United States federal law, including conspiracy to distribute narcotics, planting false evidence with intent to deceive law enforcement and obstruct justice, perjury relating to potential false statements, and multiple federal hate crime statutes related to the intentional interference with housing rights based on race or national origin." "What? No, that's preposterous. You can't. This is a terrible mistake," Beverly shrieked, her carefully maintained composure shattering completely, irrevocably, revealing the raw panic and sputtering indignation beneath. "It wasn't me. It was them. Those Mexicans. They're the criminals. Search their house, not mine. They brought this on themselves. We have clear, high-definition video evidence of you planting narcotics in their family mailbox at approximately 4:30 this morning," Mrs. McLaughlin, Agent Thompson stated evenly, calmly, holding up the tablet computer again, the incriminating surveillance footage still playing silently. looping on the screen for her to see undeniably. We also possess extensive electronic documentation of your activities in online hate forums, including specific communications explicitly planning this malicious act against your neighbors. He nodded towards the local officers, who now stepped forward. You have the right to remain silent. As the familiar words of the Miranda warning were formally recited by one of the local officers, Beverly's face crumpled completely. The self-righteous anger, the carefully constructed facade of victimhood and civic concern, drained away instantly, replaced by sheer, overwhelming, paralyzing panic. She was caught. Utterly, irrevocably, undeniably caught. Red-handed. On high-definition video. By the FBI. Her carefully constructed world, built precariously on suburban order, social standing, obsessive control, and deeply hidden, festering hate, imploded spectacularly, catastrophically, in that single, devastating moment on her own front porch. Federal agents firmly placed her wrists in cold steel handcuffs behind her back. They led her, stumbling and sobbing incoherently now, away from the immaculate house she delusionally believed she was defending, past the growing number of stunned neighbors now emerging onto their lawns, drawn by the undeniable commotion and spectacle of a federal arrest unfolding on their normally placid street. The Martinez family watched silently from their own doorway across the street, holding each other tightly, Elena and Sophia weeping openly now, but with tears of profound, cathartic relief replacing the earlier tears of fear and utter desperation. The immediate nightmare, the threat that had loomed so terrifyingly close just moments before, was finally, blessedly over, shattered by the timely, almost miraculous intervention of justice. But the echoes of the hatred they had faced, the chilling vulnerability they had felt, would inevitably, unavoidably remain, etched into their family's story. The dramatic arrest of Beverly McLaughlin, a seemingly ordinary suburban homeowner and active residence council member, sent immediate, powerful shockwaves rippling through the normally placid community of Oak Ridge Meadows. Fueled by the rapid dissemination of the stunning video evidence released by authorities, the story quickly reverberated across the nation, sparking widespread outrage and disbelief. The footage, encompassing both the stark infrared clips captured by the federal surveillance team and the crystal-clear, damning color video obtained from the Martinez family's own inexpensive doorbell camera, was released through official Department of Justice channels later that same day and immediately went viral across all social media platforms and news outlets. Seeing the seemingly respectable, middle-aged woman, a figure of minor local authority, furtively planting cocaine in her immigrant neighbor's mailbox under the concealing cloak of darkness ignited a firestorm of national outrage, disgust, and condemnation. It presented a stark, unambiguous, chillingly undeniable visual metaphor. Weaponized racism made manifest, ordinary suburban prejudice escalating chillingly, deliberately, into dangerous, calculated, potentially life-destroying criminal action. National news outlets ran extensive segments contrasting the idyllic, picture-perfect promotional image of Oak Ridge Meadows with the ugly, festering hate that had clearly taken root and been allowed to flourish within its manicured borders. The now public details of the FBI investigation brought Beverly's extensive, disturbing history of vile online vitriol, her connections to extremist ideologies, and her premeditated planning into the harsh, unforgiving light of day, further fueling the explosive story and public debate about extremism lurking in plain sight. The Oak Ridge Meadows Residents Governing Council found itself suddenly, unwillingly engulfed in an untenable public relations and legal crisis. Accusations flew rapidly and fiercely within the fractured community and from concerned outside observers. Had the council board willfully ignored earlier, clear warning signs of Beverly's escalating bias and instability? Was there previous documented inaction regarding her numerous baseless complaints against the Martinez family somehow complicit in her dangerous, criminal escalation? Angry, frightened residents packed emergency council meetings, demanding answers, transparency, resignations, and immediate accountability from their elected volunteer board members. Facing the terrifying prospect of potentially ruinous lawsuits alleging institutional negligence and fostering a discriminatory environment within the community, The beleaguered board members scrambled to publicly condemn Beverly in the strongest possible terms, formally distanced the council entirely from her actions and hateful ideology, and hastily initiated a comprehensive, independent review of their existing governing policies, complaint procedures, and enforcement practices. The damage to the community's carefully polished, upscale reputation, however, was already immense, profound, and likely to be lasting. For the Martinez family, the immediate, overwhelming wave of relief that washed over them following Beverly's arrest was inevitably, understandably tempered by the lingering, deep psychological trauma of the false accusation, the terrifying moments of powerlessness facing law enforcement, and the unwelcome, intrusive glare of intense, sudden public exposure as the story unfolded nationally. However, the spontaneous outpouring of genuine, heartfelt support they received from their immediate community and from countless strangers across the country was swift, overwhelming, and deeply moving. Neighbors they had previously barely known, perhaps intimidated by Beverly's influence or simply caught up in their own lives, stopped by their house frequently now with sincere, often emotional apologies for Beverly's hateful actions, bringing gifts of food, offering tangible help with errands or yard work, extending simple gestures of genuine friendship and unwavering solidarity. A crowdfunding campaign, started spontaneously online by a sympathetic resident from another part of town who was outraged after seeing the news story, quickly raised a significant sum of money, intended by the organizer not just to help the family cover any potential incidental legal costs or lost wages related to the ordeal, but more importantly, as a powerful, symbolic gesture of welcome, apology, and unwavering community support for the targeted family. Miguel, Elena, and Sophia found themselves unexpectedly, somewhat reluctantly, interviewed by major national news outlets, sharing their harrowing story with quiet dignity, remarkable resilience, and profound grace under pressure. They became, unwillingly at first, potent national symbols of courage, perseverance, and resilience in the face of insidious, pervasive hate and prejudice. Miguel kept his job at the garage, his boss publicly expressing unwavering support, admiration for his handling of the situation, and condemning the attack against his valued employee. Elena received similar encouragement, kindness, and support from her colleagues and management at the hotel where she worked. Sophia's high school principal, teachers, and fellow students rallied protectively, emphatically around her, ensuring she felt safe, supported, and valued within her school community, shielding her from any negative repercussions or unwanted attention. Grounded and deeply strengthened by this unexpected, powerful wave of positive affirmation and community embrace, the Martinez family made a firm, resolute, collective decision after much discussion. They would not be driven out. They would not allow hatred to dictate their future or destroy their hard-won dream. Oak Ridge Meadows was their home now, the place where they were planting roots, building their future, and they adamantly, courageously refused to let prejudice and fear win the day. They would stay. They would thrive. The federal prosecution of Beverly McLaughlin proceeded with notable judicial swiftness, largely due to the overwhelming, irrefutable nature of the evidence compiled against her by the FBI and local police. The case presented by the U.S. Attorney's Office was comprehensive and damning. The multiple, high-quality video recordings capturing the crime of planting the evidence in progress, the extensive, meticulously documented digital trail detailing her online hate activities, extremist affiliations, and specific planning communications related to the frame-up. The burner phone records definitively linking her directly to the anonymous, malicious police tip, the corroborating testimony of the federal agents and the deeply affected Martinez family members, and the forensic laboratory analysis confirming the substance she planted was indeed cocaine. Faced with such incontrovertible, multifaceted proof of her guilt, her defense attorney's attempts to mitigate her culpability or construct alternative narratives crumbled rapidly under judicial scrutiny during pretrial motions and plea negotiations. Seeing no viable path to acquittal, Beverly ultimately entered a guilty plea to several major federal charges. She was formally convicted of possession with intent to distribute narcotics, charged due to the quantity possessed and the context of planting it to frame others, planting false evidence with intent to deceive law enforcement, and obstruct justice, perjury, related to her initial false denials to federal investigators, and multiple counts under federal hate crime statutes, specifically citing the Fair Housing Act provisions prohibiting intentional interference with housing rights based on race or national origin. The federal court proceedings, particularly during the sentencing phase, laid bare the disturbing depth of her ingrained prejudice and the calculated, cruel malice inherent in her meticulously planned actions against the Martinez family. The assistant U.S. attorney prosecuting the case powerfully emphasized in court that Beverly's crime was not merely a personal attack against one innocent family, but constituted a broader assault against the entire community, against the nation's fundamental principles of equality, diversity, and justice. The prosecutor drew a clear, chilling, direct line connecting the dangers of unchecked online radicalization and extremist ideologies to devastating, real-world violence, intimidation, and harm. Beverly McLaughlin was found guilty on all significant federal charges to which she had pled. The presiding federal judge, delivering the sentence from the bench, spoke scathingly, with barely concealed contempt, of her deliberate, cynical abuse of community trust, her shocking weaponization of the justice system itself against innocent victims, and the profound, lasting emotional and psychological harm caused by her clearly hate-motivated criminal actions. She was sentenced to a lengthy, substantial term of incarceration in the federal prison system, ensuring she would spend many years physically removed from the community she had sought to terrorize and divide through her hateful actions. As a further, significant consequence of her conviction on serious federal charges, particularly those related to drug trafficking facilitation and hate crimes, the federal government successfully initiated civil asset forfeiture proceedings against Beverly McLaughlin. Her valuable assets, including the very house on Maple Drive from which she had launched her insidious campaign of hate, were legally confiscated by federal authorities. The legal system ensured that the primary symbol of her perceived suburban superiority and financial security was stripped away from her as a direct, tangible result of her federal crimes. The proceeds generated from the liquidation of her seized assets were legally designated primarily for victim restitution funds and to support federal law enforcement programs dedicated specifically to combating hate crimes and narcotics trafficking nationwide. Her downfall was complete, her punishment comprehensive. Months slowly turned into a quiet year. The steady passage of time began to gently smooth the roughest, most jarring edges of the trauma for the Martinez family and for the wider Oak Ridge Meadows community. The seized house directly across the street from the Martinez family, once Beverly's domain, eventually sold at government auction. Its new occupants, a young family fully aware of the property's troubled recent history, moved in with a quiet but clear determination to contribute positively, actively, to the neighborhood's ongoing healing process and its evolving identity. Oak Ridge Meadows remained irrevocably changed by the ordeal. The incident had served as a harsh, unavoidable awakening for many residents. The community felt more self-aware now, perhaps more cautious in some ways, but also showed tangible, hopeful signs of becoming a more genuinely inclusive, actively welcoming, and vigilant community, less tolerant of casual prejudice or unchecked power. The chastened residents' governing council diligently implemented the mandated diversity, equity, and inclusion training for all its volunteer board members and significantly revised its internal complaint procedures to include robust safeguards against discriminatory abuse, anonymous harassment, and the potential for weaponization of the rules against vulnerable residents. The Martinez family, against all odds, thrived. Their resilience became a quiet, powerful testament to their strength of character and their enduring faith. Sophia graduated high school with distinction, earning numerous academic honors, and received a generous scholarship package to attend a prestigious university several states away. Inspired directly by her family's harrowing ordeal and the legal battle that followed, she formally declared her intention to major in political science and eventually pursue a career in civil rights law, hoping fervently to one day defend and advocate for others unjustly targeted by prejudice and systemic hate. Miguel's reputation as a highly skilled, meticulously honest, and thoroughly reliable mechanic grew steadily throughout the region, primarily through positive word-of-mouth referrals from satisfied customers. His growing success allowed him to build a loyal clientele base and begin realistically dreaming, for the first time, of eventually saving enough capital to open his own small, independent auto repair garage, the ultimate realization of his professional aspirations. Elena, deeply moved and personally empowered by the unexpected, overwhelming outpouring of kindness and support they had received from both neighbors and strangers during their darkest hours, became actively, passionately involved as a volunteer leader in a local immigrant advocacy and support group. She generously dedicated her limited free time now to helping newcomers navigate the often challenging, confusing process of settling into their new lives in America, offering practical assistance, translation services, and invaluable emotional support drawn from her own lived experiences. On warm summer evenings, Miguel, Elena, and Sophia would often sit together quietly on their comfortable front porch swing, the gentle night air filled with the sweet, evocative scent of Elena's vibrant, flourishing flowers cascading from the window boxes she tended with such loving care. They could still sometimes see the faint, fleeting remnants of deep-seated fear flicker momentarily in each other's eyes when a car slowed unexpectedly on the street late at night, or when a stranger lingered perhaps a moment too long on the sidewalk nearby. Invisible scars left behind by the trauma, reminders of their vulnerability. But that residual fear was consistently, determinately overshadowed by their shared, quiet strength, their deep, unwavering familial bond, and the powerful, liberating knowledge that they had faced down vicious, targeted hatred and had absolutely refused to be broken, silenced, or driven away from their chosen home. Justice had been served, not just in the conviction and lengthy imprisonment of one hateful, misguided woman, but more profoundly, more enduringly, in the quiet dignity, the enduring hope, the unwavering resilience, and the flourishing future of the family she had tried, and utterly, spectacularly failed, to destroy. Their continued, thriving presence on Maple Drive was now, in itself, a powerful symbol, not of intrusion, as Beverly had perceived it, but of rightful belonging, hard-won resilience, and the enduring promise of the American dream, however imperfectly realized.